Why Americans need another stimulus in 2025. So right now in 2025, many Americans are asking, do we really need another stimulus check? And if so, what are the chances of actually getting one? Well, here's the reality. Millions of people across the United States could be on track to receive a fresh round of financial help very soon. And why is that? Look at this. Instant view. U.S. inflation rises in July, in line with expectations, but that's not the full story. At a very important White House press conference, Karoline Leavitt made a statement that set off a big discussion. Watch this, she said.
Look, we inherited an economic mess from the previous administration, but this administration is focused on fixing it every day. And part of that is signing the largest tax cuts into law to put more money back into the pockets of these small businesses.
We inherited an economic mess from the previous administration, but this administration is working every single day to fix it. Part of that work involves signing into law the largest set of tax cuts designed to put more money directly back into the pockets of small business owners. Now, if we stop for a moment and think about what she's saying, according to Karoline Leavitt, the current leadership stepped into an economy that was already struggling because of what happened under the last administration. And now they're working on repairs. But here's the key. If there truly is an economic mess that has left regular Americans struggling, then clearly it's also time to deliver immediate relief. Temporary relief that allows ordinary people to stabilize their lives until the economy itself stabilizes. That's why an increasing number of analysts, economists, and financial experts are now raising their voices. They're saying, enough is enough. Something must be done quickly. And what are they pointing to as the best solution? You guessed it, new stimulus checks. In fact, President Donald J. Trump himself recently spoke about the potential for new payments to go directly to Americans. I'll explain what he said in just a moment. But before that, look at this update. U.S. producer prices surge in July as Trump tariffs push costs higher. U.S. producer prices surged in July, largely driven upward by tariffs introduced by Trump's own administration. These tariffs raised the costs of goods significantly. And according to a wide range of experts, those very same reciprocal tariffs are now one of the driving forces behind today's rising inflation. In a few minutes, I'll walk you through all the details of how this connects, but before we do, can I ask you a quick favor? It only takes 2 seconds. If you find this information helpful, please hit the like button. It really helps. All right, let's dig into it. So here's where things get interesting. Recently, Donald J. Trump opened up about the possibility of introducing new direct payments for Americans. He explained that thanks to the tariffs he imposed on countries across the globe, tariffs that he refers to as reciprocal tariffs, the government has been pulling in billions of dollars every single day. Trump's message was simple. This money is coming in consistently, and it could be used for 2 major things. First, to pay down the national debt. And second, to return part of that money back to the American people in the form of what he called dividends. In other words, stimulus-style checks. A number of economists are now weighing in. Many believe that instead of one-time checks, the government could go a step further by providing monthly payments. That way, families and individuals would feel a more immediate and steady relief from the heavy financial pressure they're under. And remember Karoline Leavitt's earlier words? She admitted that the current administration inherited an economic mess. If that's the case, then people are asking, shouldn't the very first step be to help struggling Americans stay afloat right now before asking them to be patient for long-term economic fixes? This isn't just speculation. Analysts are making the point very clearly. While the government works to repair the larger economy, direct relief is needed in the meantime. But this isn't the only thing Karoline Leavitt said. She also commented more deeply on inflation, small business struggles, and the recovery process.
You have to remember, we are 6 months into this administration, and we had a president who had no business experience, had no idea what he was doing, and who funneled billions of wasteful spending dollars into our economy, which created the worst inflation crisis in a generation. Now this president is focused on tackling inflation, deregulating, cutting costs, cutting red tape to make it easier for small business owners to thrive. And again, the economic indicators show that we are moving in the right direction. In January, when this president showed up to the White House, the 6-month annualized core inflation rate was 3.7%. Today, 6 months later, the 6-month annualized core inflation rate is 2.4%. So we are trending in the right direction. Moving forward, since President Trump took office, for another 6 months, inflation will be tracking at 1.9% at this trajectory. You look at grocery prices, they fell, energy prices fell, fuel oil fell, ship fares fell, propane fell, butter, margarine.
Watch this. She explained that when the administration took office, they were 6 months in, dealing with the aftermath of what she described as leadership that had no business experience and made reckless spending choices. According to her, those decisions created one of the worst inflation crises in a generation. She then argued that the current president is taking the opposite approach, focusing on reducing inflation, deregulating industries, cutting red tape, and lowering costs so that small businesses can survive and thrive. She pointed to certain economic indicators to say progress is happening. For instance, she claimed that when the president first arrived in January, the 6-month annualized core inflation rate stood at 3.7%. 6 months later, she said, it had dropped to 2.4%. If that trend continued, she argued, inflation could track as low as 1.9% in the next 6 months. She also listed areas where prices were falling, like groceries, fuel oil, propane, butter, margarine, eggs, and over-the-counter medicines. Now, I need to pause here because this is where things get complicated. The numbers Karoline gave don't fully line up with independent reports. According to Gallup's latest findings, grocery prices haven't dropped. They've actually risen by about 21% in just the past 3 years. And the official July inflation number wasn't 2.4%, it was 2.7%. So while the administration might want to present the situation as rapidly improving, everyday Americans are experiencing something very different when they go to the store or pay their bills. And when tariffs drive up the costs of imported goods like wheat, rice, and flour, basic staples that aren't fully produced in the U.S., then ordinary households feel the pinch even more. In other words, it's not enough to say everything is trending in the right direction. Many experts call that misleading because it doesn't match what families are actually living through week to week. So where does this leave people? Most Americans aren't interested in political blame games, whether one administration faults the other or not. What people are saying loud and clear is, what about us? Families need real support, not just speeches. And that's why Trump's recent comments about the possibility of new stimulus payments created such a wave of attention. He specifically referred to them as tariff rebate checks. Shortly afterward, Senator Josh Hawley stepped forward with a new piece of legislation designed to put those checks into action. Here's what his plan includes: a $600 check for every eligible individual. The same amount, $600, for every dependent child. Married couples filing jointly would receive $1,200. The eligibility thresholds are also straightforward. Individuals making $75,000 or less would get the full $600. Couples making $150,000 or less would get the full $1,200. Even those earning above those levels could receive partial payments with a 5% phase-out rate. That means nearly all Americans, except for the wealthiest top 3 to 5%, would see some kind of benefit. But here comes the twist. Even though Hawley is a Republican and a close ally of Trump, someone who openly supports and admires him, his proposal is already facing pushback from members of his own party. Many Republican lawmakers are voicing opposition, which caught people by surprise. To actually become law, Hawley's bill must pass through 3 major hurdles. Debate, which has already started. Voting in Congress, first in the House, then in the Senate. Presidential approval, finally reaching Trump's desk for a signature. If all of those steps succeed, then Americans earning $75,000 or less, or $150,000 as a couple, will indeed receive $600 or $1,200 respectively. Most analysts believe Trump would sign the bill without hesitation. After all, he was the one who suggested tariff rebate checks in the first place. But the sticking point is whether enough lawmakers will let it reach his desk. Now, it's worth noting that some Americans remain skeptical. They remember when Trump, alongside Elon Musk, spoke about a so-called Doge stimulus check, which never materialized. So when people hear about a $600 rebate check, some dismiss it as another political stunt or lollipop designed to raise hope but not actually deliver relief. That skepticism is only heightened by the reality that everyday costs are still climbing. As mentioned earlier, Gallup's data shows grocery prices up 21% over 3 years. Families aren't feeling relief, they're feeling more pressure. And when politicians insist prices are falling across the board, many citizens feel completely disconnected from what's being said in Washington. It's almost as if there are two completely different realities, one in which leaders claim things are improving, and another in which households are juggling rising bills, high rent, and costlier food. So where does that leave us? On the one hand, you have an administration insisting the numbers show progress. On the other hand, you have ordinary Americans saying, "We can't wait. We need help now." And then there's the possibility, still uncertain, that tariff rebate checks could become a reality if Hawley's legislation gains enough traction. If it does, millions of Americans could see relief in the form of $600 checks, $1,200 for couples, and $600 per dependent child. But until then, families remain in limbo, wondering whether this is just political talk or if real financial help is truly on the way. So, what do you think? Do you believe this proposal will pass, or is it just another promise that won't go anywhere? Let me know in the comments.